All right, so we get right to it.
Sure.
Okay, so we'll start our interview by asking, why did you decide to write a memoir?
Well, I decided for several reasons, and I have to tell you, first of all, it started a long time ago, actually, this memoir. And when I started to write it, I had a fellowship at Hedgebrook, which is a writers' colony in Seattle, near Seattle, and and at that time, I so wished I'd gotten a PhD in anything just to be more useful. And a year later, I read what I had written, and it was so moany groany. I thought there's got to be something more, to say that's more positive, than what I had written. But then a long time went past, and when I finally did write a memoir, it just seemed like the time was right to do it. It did. So that's why I did it.
Well, we're glad you did.
Thank you.
How did you come up with the title, An Onion in My Pocket?
Well, it really happened that I had an onion in my pocket. I was in Spanish class, and I had a big, shirt on with big pockets, and I took the onion out because I'd been cooking with my friend, and the onion was left over, and it was beautiful, and so I didn't want to just leave it, and I put it on the desk, and while I was looking for my pencils and paper, and people started to laugh, and at that moment I realized, to me, this is normal. It's normal to have an onion in your pocket, or to do any kind of things when your friends come to visit from California. They arrive with lots of egg cartons with a fig nestled in each one, or a suitcase full of quince before I had quince trees, and it was wonderful. It was wonderful to be part of that world of an onion in your pocket, or a snake in your purse, or whatever it was. It was, in this case, it was a gopher snake, because they really do help in the garden. So it's food related. Anyway, that's how it started.
Wow. Okay, so tell us, which parts of your life story did you most enjoy writing about?
Well, I think I really enjoyed writing about greens, actually, because it told me how much food has changed, that things that we used to make that everyone was excited about, wilted spinach salads using lots of cream and butter and so forth, the way it was then, just isn't anymore. I mean, we didn't even have a vegan customer when I was there. And that was, in the 80s, in the beginning, we had one person who didn't want feta cheese in his wilted spinach salad, and we called him Non-Dairy Jerry. I mean, we could call him that because there was only one. We have no idea why he didn't want cheese or anything, but that's how it was. Anyway, that was fun to do, to learn about how culture changes what we eat and how we
I
change.
remember that wilted spinach salad. It was.
You.
And what about what parts did you least enjoy writing about?
I think, well, I liked writing the whole book, but in terms of going back and rereading what I had written, my least favorite parts were actually the parts about myself growing up in Davis, and all of that, my parents, partly because I was bored. I had read it so many times, and I told my editor, I said, I just threw it away because I wasn't so interested. And she said, oh, let me see that. And so I sent it to her, and she said, oh, this is good. You should keep it. It needs to be in the book. So there you go. You never know.
I agree. I enjoyed reading that part. But I understand why it might not have been enjoyable to write it.
Well, it was hard.
Yeah, I understand. Well, let's talk about why you decided to become a chef and how you became a chef.
Well, I never really saw myself as a chef, and I didn't really want to do it. I was assigned the job to be the chef of greens, believe it or not, because it was owned by the Zen Center, and I was a Zen student. That was my work, was to be the chef of greens. I didn't really see myself as a chef. I didn't feel very well prepared. And I knew more than a lot of people at Zen Center about food, because I was interested in food. I was excited by food, but that wasn't enough, to really take on what I did. And it was hard. It was very, very hard. And the other one was how I became a chef. That's your other question.
Yes.
I think if you read the book, it is self-explanatory, because I was interested in food, and I did work at Chez Panisse, and I traveled to the extent that I could then, and I got experiences, and I don't know, I just wanted to cook, but I never saw myself as a chef.
But you started as a chef at the Zen Center, right?
Well, I was head of the kitchen. We didn't call it chef.
Right. And do you think that influenced your future cooking?
Well, it gave me experience, but not really, because it was so odd, and it was so long before I actually opened Greens. It seemed like a very long time. And, we were a bunch of people, who didn't really care what we ate very much. And suddenly, when you have an audience like at Greens, you have to put more energy into what you have and what you're doing than you did before, cooking for just a group of students. But that was a very good and a very different and a very difficult experience as well.
And so when you went to Greens, did you radically change how you procured your ingredients?
Let's see. Well, we had a farm, Green Gulch Farm, and it started about the same time that Greens started. So it didn't do everything, but I really wanted to have a farm-driven menu. And this is long before we use those words, farm-driven, farm-to-table, any of that kind of stuff. So I contacted somebody who lived in Modesto, and I knew her from the farmer's market in Davis, and she and her mother drove down every week, maybe once or twice a week, and brought us food from the hot Summer Valley, as opposed to where we lived in Green Gulch. It was so foggy and cold, and it was very, very different. So yes, it did change the way I procured food, but that was all changing anyway. And actually the markets were getting better and better. We had green leaf produce, we had veritable vegetable, and good farmers, were represented in those venues too. So I had access to a good amount of produce.
And so what about today? How do you prefer to shop for food today?
Today is hard because of the pandemic partly, but I just got a CSA last winter, which I'd never had before, partly because I'm always testing recipes, so I have an agenda, in my food shopping. But I kind of like getting a bag of surprises every Thursday afternoon. And I went with that CSA because it was close to me. I prefer to shop at the farmer's market or my garden or my neighbor's gardens because they're very generous and offering. Everybody's very generous around food, I think. Eggs I get here in the village, or I go to a local farmer's market, which is very small, but it's exciting. And I used to manage the market in Santa Fe, and I used to always go there, but now it's just too long a trip. It's 50 miles round trip, and it's a big deal. It's a big deal to go on Saturday morning and go early to find a parking place, that kind of thing. So I go to a smaller market and I make do with what we have. As far as shopping goes in stores, I do very select shopping. I go to Trader Joe's for laundry soap and toilet paper and things like that, and organic cauliflower because we like cauliflower. It makes a good meal. In fact, I just made a curry today with it. I go to the co-op when I can get there. It's an extra few miles to go to the co-op, but I know they'll have really good vegetables. I go to another store for yogurt and for good buttermilk and things like that. That I never go to Whole Foods. I did go recently to pick up something and I realized, oh, wow, it's just so much fun, you know. I mean, our Whole Foods is not very locally oriented, I must say, but there's so many goodies there, you know, but I'm not tempted by them anymore.
We have very similar shopping habits, I think, but so what do you think about modern day food production and distribution in general, about, you know, where things are now with food production versus how they used to be?
I think it's kind of an interesting time because we're having to undo so much that we've taken for granted. I think in general, I think food production and delivery systems are terrible. They're horrible. There's a reason we have so many diabetics in our culture, so much this, so much that, cancer and so forth, you know, and I think it has to do with the food. I think it's time for us to get over California as the bread basket, you know, the vegetable basket for the world, and to get over Kansas as the meat, you know, place in the world. And Tom Philpott wrote a beautiful book about that this year called Perilous Bounty. I don't know if you know that book, but that's his argument, is let's decentralize, because we can grow a lot of things here. It's true, in the winter is hard. Last winter I thought, if I see one more little red daikon in my bag, I'm going to scream. But I learned how to cook them, and that's just part of living in the winter in the desert where I live. It's not California, but we all have limitations we have to get used to, I think.
Thanks for the book recommendation. When our authors make those recommendations, we usually make a note of them and we send them out in the follow-up email.
Oh, good.
Otherwise, we get a lot of requests, so we just take care of it right there. So thank you for that. And I'm sure I'll be putting that on my reading list as well. So to switch gears a little bit, I was really interested in talking about the chapter in the book that's called My Vegetarian Problem.
Oh, yes.
Wondering, do you think in that chapter, do you think you managed to put that topic to rest, or are you still
not
asked about it?
Not at all. In fact, it's come back to haunt me. I wanted to call the whole book something like that, My Vegetarian Problem, and they wouldn't let me. They said, well, you can do a chapter, you know, but it's pretty negative. But no, I can't put it to rest, and it's okay. I've made my peace with it. But I do get asked all the time, if I'm a vegetarian, or people assume that I am. And I do like vegetarian food a lot. I cook it. I cooked my own books a lot during the pandemic, and it was fun and it was delicious and so forth. But I'm not an absolute fanatic about any way of eating. None.
Okay, well, what on that note, what do you think about plant-based food today and the directions that we're going with plant-based?
An Impossible Burger, I don't want it. I mean, I really think soil is it. You know, that's the key, and I don't think a totally plant-based diet is necessarily a good thing. We could eat more vegetables than we do, but I'm sort of shocked by it. I don't like it where we're going. It seems like it's retrograde. We're going backwards into things. You know, people don't seem to mind about GMOs. They, you know, in the 90s, chefs were very interested in authenticity. They're not anymore. You know, it's like pile it on, make it. I just don't get it. I really, really don't understand.
So did you say soil is the key?
Yeah, I think soil, regenerative agriculture, all that stuff is much, much, much more important than.
Do you want to like elaborate on that a little bit for maybe people in the audience who aren't familiar with those terms?
Sure. Well, I've just been reading a book that just came out called Defending Beef by Nicolette Hahn Nyman. And she wrote it actually 10 years ago when she was a vegetarian, but she's updated it and it's come out again. And it's so good because she makes all these really good points about what animals do when you have them on your farm or in the eating grass and so forth. And they build the health of the soil. They put bacteria and insects and things into the soil, into the plant world, you know. And, you know, I mean, I think it's all about grass anyway. All food is grass in some way or another. Oh, I don't know what to say about this, but I was on the board of the Southwest Grass-Fed Livestock Association, or Alliance rather, for many years. Twice I was on that board because I feel it's important, if we're going to eat meat, not to have it in great big CAFOs, but to have smaller and less of it. You know, I'm shocked when I look at the marquee or the newspaper of a supermarket and I see chuck roast or something, and I think that's what it costs when I was a girl many decades ago. You know, who's making any money? I don't know. Grass-fed is very, very expensive, but you don't eat a lot of it. You don't need to eat a lot of it. It doesn't have to be a steak. It doesn't have to be a chop. It can be an arm roast. It can be something else. So
I agree. I've had the same experience with prices. It's strange.
yeah, it is.
Seems to work. So maybe let's talk a little bit about gardening. We were talking about this before the program started, but how did you get started with gardening?
I was ashamed because I was on the board of the Seed Savers Exchange. Everybody there was such a good gardener, and I had no experience gardening at all. And partly because I had lived in a community for so many years. And when I finally got a place to garden, I thought, where I live now, 25 years ago, I should garden. I should learn to garden. And I'm still learning. It's hard here in New Mexico, coming from California, but it's not as hard as it was when I lived in Flagstaff, that's for sure. You know, it's about the same. Anyway, that's how I got started in gardening. I was ashamed. I was ashamed that I didn't garden and I didn't know anything about it.
And do you have any advice for people who are new to gardening? You know, how would you start?
Well, I think it's really important to think about what you want to eat when you plant food. You know, when you plant vegetables, especially. Maybe if you're just doing an ornamental garden, that's fine. But if you're gardening for food, you have to think about what you want to eat. And you also have to think about, and nobody ever talks about this, as far as I know, about, for example, you don't need, if you're just 2 people and maybe only one of you eats eggplant, you don't need 5 plants of eggplant, a fairy tale eggplant, because they will just make so many eggplant, you will die, you know. So you have to know that. You have to get some sense of that, and you will eventually, especially if you're starting small. Also for gardeners, and now with the climate so strange the way it is, the climate change and so forth, I always want to find seeds that are grown pretty much locally, raised locally, because they've had a chance to adapt. And, you know, which is why saving your own seeds and buying local seeds is important. Both of those things are important. Don't you think so?
Yes, I
Yeah.
definitely think so. And I also agree with your point about not planting too many plants, and I'm still learning that.
Oh yeah, it takes a long time.
Yes, and some things I can, you know, process or freeze, and then that's okay. But then there's some things where you just end up with too many. But luckily, I know lots of people who like fresh produce.
Yeah, there you go. So you can, and I think that's what happens with my friends too. You know, they say, oh, I planted way too much kale. Would you like some? Yes, I would like a little bit. If you don't like kale, don't grow it. or grow
Yep.
just 1 or 2 plants or something. And when it comes to the aphids, just hose them off. That's all you have to do.
That's good advice.
Yeah.
What about what about advice for people who are new to cooking?
Well, I think I always tell people, decide what you want to eat, first of all. If you like gratins, fine. If you like pizza, fine. If you like salads, fine. Just decide what you want to eat, and then get a cookbook and follow a recipe exactly for a couple of times, maybe 2 or 3 times at the most. Then improvise. Then you're free to improvise and go ahead and do what you want, or change your ingredients or so forth. But that's my main advice that I give to people.
All right. I'm getting told I need to hurry it up so we can get to the reading. So let's skip on to, what's your favorite meal? What's your go-to meal that you
Well, I saw that question earlier and I had to pause. So during the winter, we have a Friday night is baked potatoes. I never grew up with a baked potato. I didn't even know what a baked potato was, but we have baked potatoes. It's amazing how many people want to come to dinner because we're having baked potatoes. It's crazy. During the summer, we switch a little bit to BLTs on Friday night, as long as we have good tomatoes and so forth. And if people again like that too. And we make a Chipotle Mayonnaise, which I learned from Dan Welch, who was my first husband, and he often will bring it when he comes if he doesn't like mine so much. And it's just Chipotle powder and mayonnaise with garlic and lime and something to punch it up a little bit.
That's a good one. I forgot about BLTs.
Yeah, they're good. Everybody's so excited to have a BLT. It's crazy. I mean, we had company last night. I said, is a BLT okay with you? Oh yeah, I'll bring champagne. I mean, he was that excited, and he did.
All right, I'm gonna have to try that one.
But I do make curries, I make tarts, I make other things when it's a more formal kind of meal. I mean, open-faced sandwiches or baked potatoes, it's not much. But we didn't entertain a lot during the pandemic, so I don't know
Yes.
how to answer that.
Same. Let's talk quickly about the future. You mentioned a future book project. Any details you can share? Can you elaborate?
Yeah, I can actually. In this book that you have, I've written quite a bit about this meal chant, which started 72 labors, brought us this food. We should know how it comes to us. And that's always been something that I care deeply about. And I love that chant, 72 labors. It was changed later to innumerable labors. And it didn't have the same punch to me. 72, what are the 72? Is it more? Is it less? Is it 72? So I'm writing a book about various foodstuffs that we take for granted, and like dates, for example, and how the medjool date came to America. Parsnips, long vegetables that take a long time to mature, a longer time than, say, carrots, so they cost more. That's why. Same with leeks. Same with not asparagus so much, but the cost there is in water. Anyway, so I'm going to be working on that. But during the summer, it's just too hot, and I want to be outside in my garden. So I'll wait till winter.
I hear you. Okay, so at this time, we're going to ask you to do a brief reading from Onion in My Pocket.
Okay, I want to say, first of all, about Onion in My Pocket, that the last chapter is about meals that I remember, not because they were vegetarian or anything, but because they were just good, and they were presented with kindness and thoughtfulness, and that's what I really responded to. So this meal is about a meal that I had with my friend Ernie Macy when I lived in Flagstaff. When I moved to Flagstaff, I had a few goals. One was to start life afresh, to be out of the Bay Area and away from everything that kept defining me as I had been known, mainly as a Zen student and the chef of greens. Another goal was to learn a sport, so I bought a mountain bike and took up that perilous form of riding. And a third was to learn to barrel race. And my mentor was Ernie Macy, a cowboy, then in his 80s, who dreamed of moving to Colorado where the water was. He had 2 quarter-horse stallions, Pride and Cochise, and we rode them in the cinder fields that spread out east of Flagstaff. I always carried a canteen on our rides, and Ernie always looked at it and then stared into space and said, "Water just makes you thirsty." I can only imagine what he would make of our hydration-obsessed culture today. But one day, Ernie invited me to lunch. It was summer. I wasn't at all hungry. I had company coming that evening to cook for. I didn't really want to go, but it was a kind gesture, and without thinking, I accepted the invitation. The menu consisted of a large steak from Smith's fried in salad oil, 2 foods I would never buy or eat on my own. There was also sliced zucchini cooked for about 40 minutes in an entire stick of margarine, another food I didn't eat. The margarine, that is. Surprisingly, it was a delicious meal. The soggy, overcooked zucchini really tasted like squash. And though I wasn't much of a steak eater, the steak was good too, really good. I recall nothing else about the menu, but I have a sweet memory of Ernie cooking at his little stove in 2 cast iron skillets and his big smile when I said, "This is so good," and I meant it. And all the reasons I hadn't wanted to come to lunch disappeared completely. Everything got done. I went to the airport, I cooked for my friends, and I ate dinner with them. I may have been too full, but decades later, I still recall Ernie's lunch with pleasure.
Thank you for sharing that beautiful story with us.
Thank you. It's a little story, but you know, it's the kindness with which Ernie offered that meal that's really struck me. And that was a long time ago, more than 30 years ago, and I still recall it.
Wow. It must have been very memorable.
Well, all the meals are, but they're not memorable for the reason that 3-star meals are, which are meant to shock and awe and be wonderful and, you know, and timeless and so forth. But these were just ordinary people cooking food for me. And some of them I didn't even attend.
Okay, so we're going to move on to the questions from our audience members now. And thank you, audience members, for your great questions. So we're going to start with what food or ingredient are you excited about right now?
Tomatoes, because I just picked my first big Cherokee purple tomato today, and I can't wait for it to finish ripening and be ready to eat. And I bought Cherokee purples at the farmer's market on last Friday, which were wonderful. And I have mostly what I grew are little currant tomatoes this year, which are all struggling because of the heat and the dryness. But what else is new? Nothing. Anyway, this time of year, tomatoes are it.
Definitely. Okay, now this question's about being in a Zen monastery. What guidance would you give to someone contemplating entering a Zen monastery? I was left with the impression that the experience had a big impact on your life, but I didn't get the sense that it was a happy time for you or that you necessarily got what you expected or hoped for. Is Zen still an important part of your life?
Not in the same way at all. I don't sit, I don't go to a monastery, I'm not in one and so forth like that. But greens was very hard to do. It really, really was. And that's mainly what I was writing about.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, next, the next one is 2 questions. First, how has climate change affected on a smaller scale your own private garden, and on a larger scale, your growing region in northern New Mexico?
Well, they're kind of the same answer in a way, because what we're going through is a big drought. And, you know, we've burned our forests, so we don't have so much fire as we used to. But we get smoke from other people. It's fires from Arizona, from California even. How it's changed my garden. There's just less water. I've moved, I don't do a big garden anymore. This year I haven't. I've just moved everything inside my walled garden, and I'm doing very little, pretty much because I don't have water to keep it alive. I watch it die. What's happening in northern New Mexico is the same thing. You know, we're losing water. It's becoming a drought state that's going to go on for probably a very long time. So that's upsetting for sure. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, next question. If Netflix approached you with an unlimited budget to produce a food documentary, what would it be?
I have no idea. I have no idea, but it's an interesting question. Thank you for that.
Okay, somebody wants to know where you live. I think you said New Mexico.
I do live in New Mexico. I live in Galisteo, New Mexico, which is not Santa Fe. I mean, I live fairly close to Santa Fe, 25 miles or so, but Galisteo is a tiny little village. It has about a population of 200 people. There's nothing to buy except real estate, and it's all been sold, you know, so that's right.
Sounds nice. Okay, now we have a question about, I enjoyed the part in your book where you talked about the little cookies you loved at the Zen Center. Is that sort of the same recipe you have in your book, In My Kitchen?
Oh, I have no idea. Those were the walnut crescent cookies. Is that what you're talking about?
I think so.
Yeah. And in my kitchen, I don't have that recipe, but the shortbread that I do have is very good. And I like it a lot, too much.
Okay, we'll have to try that. Now, this was a question I had as well. Are you really done writing recipe books? Because we can't have too many of your books.
Oh, thank you. That's so kind of you. Yes, I hope so, but you never know. You never know. I mean, partly I wrote this book because I wanted to say, I'm done, I'm done, I'm done. But I'm very interested in grain right now. So among the books I have that I love are books on grain and growing grain, cooking with different grains and so forth like that. So who knows? Who knows?
Okay. Well, yeah, who knows? We can still hope, right? We can hold out hope.
You know, you
Okay.
don't want more of the same. And I was really starting to repeat myself a lot. So, you know, we'll see.
Okay, so I'm just reading these questions in the order that they appear. So we're kind of going from one topic and then back to the same. So this question is asking, why did you decide to become a Zen student?
Oh, I do cover that in the book. So, and it's a very, I don't know exactly how to answer it, but I was interested in city planning before I became a Zen student. And the idea that you could never satisfy people's desires was so evident in the work, in the research I was doing in city planning, that I thought, yeah, I have to get to the bottom of this somehow. So I became a Zen student, but it was a very different Zen Center than it is today. I will say that.
Okay, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Now we want to talk about your writing process. So what was your writing process for the memoir? You know, how did it go for you? And did you adhere to a writing schedule? This is a common question we get at these. People always like to hear about the writing process. So as much as you can share.
Okay. I love to write, and I had some material already that I had been working on. I always get up in the morning early, and I want to write first thing, you know. And what I like about writing cookbooks is kind of a balance between the morning effort of writing and the afternoon effort of cooking. One is mental, one is physical. And I like that a lot. With the memoir, I didn't get to do that so much, but I'd go in the kitchen every day at 3 and, look around, because I am married and I have a husband and he wants dinner when he comes home. So, I still cooked. But I like to write, and I like to start the day writing. That's the main thing.
That's good advice as well. Okay, now somebody would like to know, when was the last time you visited Greens and what did you think?
I visited Greens, let's see, I don't know, several years ago. Usually when I go to the Bay Area, I'm in Berkeley and not San Francisco. So I know a lot of people won't come across the bridge to see me, so I don't necessarily go across the bridge to eat either. But I thought it was good and I liked it. And it's so much better than it's just really, really nice. When I was there, it was all experiments and experimental, and it was hard. We didn't know what we were doing, but there's a feeling that people do know what they're doing now.
Okay, now we want to ask, someone who would like to ask about your points about small scale farming are well taken, but food as a commodity is our way of life. It is part of our capitalistic DNA. How do we make money while still respecting the food we eat? That's a big question.
Well, I think we can. People want to eat. They want to eat good food. I don't see the problem with making money. I don't. Do you?
We talked about this before, but we talked about that I also am a big supporter of farmers markets, and that it's because one of the reasons is because it does help local food producers to be able to survive on and make money on the work that they do. And I think it's a great value to the community as well as to the.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I feel the same way, and I feel having a garden really makes you appreciate what it takes to get food. And, not many of us live on our gardens for very long or for very much food. We're still going to pay money and buy it. But I don't see the problem. I don't see a conflict.
Yeah, I sure was glad I had my garden when I was waiting those long lines to go into, Trader Joe's last spring.
Yeah.
Okay, somebody would like to know what you plant in New Mexico.
Oh, well, it's interesting. I try to plant the foods that I grew up with, basically, because I'm a Californian. So I do like that kind of food, and many of our good farmers are from California too, from UC Santa Cruz, where I went to school. But in New Mexico, I'm sorry, there's mosquitoes in here in my room. So in New Mexico, I don't know. I would like to try to eat more wild plants and know what's around me more than I do. I do have alliums that have come out of nowhere. I have no idea what they are, though Dan tells me he thinks that they're a wild onion. Maybe so, I don't know. But it's just so exciting. I was just down in the Gila Wilderness, which is in the southern part of New Mexico, and there's so much more diversity there, plant diversity. I went crazy. I came back and I felt like my garden was totally irrelevant. I didn't want to eat any of that food, but I didn't know what else to eat, really. But we do have verdolagas, which is the purslane, and I also grow an upright purslane, as well as the one that goes along the ground. We have quelites, which is, you might know it as Good King Henry. It's a wild spinach. It's a wild green that you can cook. It's very delicious. And the local Hispanic people still eat that food, and we can too. There's no reason why we can't. It's plentiful.
Sounds good. Okay, and now back to the pandemic. How has the pandemic affected your approach to food preparation?
Ah, it's interesting. I cooked a lot for my own books during the pandemic. Um, and then I cooked from other books too, but not just exclusively mine. But, you know, as a cookbook author, you don't get to cook from your books that often, maybe when you're making them, but after they're made, you're on to the next thing. So you don't really get to do it. And and it was really wonderful to cook that food and to get to know it again and to correct, you know, I mean, always want to correct and change, you know, what I'm doing. So that's one thing. But the pandemic also brought up meat for my husband because he grew up eating steak 3 or 4 nights a week. I ate steak once as a kiddo, only once, you know, and I write about that experience in the book. So, you know, I had to adjust to him too. Um, and I did. It was fine. And I tried lots of new things I hadn't tried before.
Yeah, I think we all probably did.
We probably did, yeah. I so wish that I could talk with whoever is asking the question and find out, what did you do during the pandemic that was different, you know?
Well, they can add things into the chat if they want to. And we usually save the chat transcript when we send it to you.
Okay, thank you.
So if anybody wants to add into the chat what they ate in the pandemic to share with Deborah, we can certainly make sure that she gets that
Okay.
afterwards.
But I will say this, I didn't have such exciting food. I used to have so many good vinegars and I do have good olive oil still because my brother makes it. You know, but a lot of the excitement of food went away. And I don't know whether it's because of the pandemic or because we were isolated or because why exactly, but it just went away. And I think it's going to continue to go away probably unless we make an effort.
Yeah, very true. Do you bake bread?
Yes, I do. I bake sourdough bread and and sometimes I bake yeasted bread, but yes, I do. And I have a mock mill, so I grind my own flour, which is really,
Wow.
and you know, it's not a big deal to get a mill. They're cheap now compared to what they used to be. I also grind oats in a flucker to make oatmeal for my husband, and that's kind of been fun too
Wow.
this year.
I mean, anything that I've never done, of course, sounds impressive to me, and I've never ground flour, but maybe you'll be inspiring me and I will.
Oh, it's easy. You just put it in and you turn it on and it comes out flour. And it's whole wheat too, unless you sift it, you know, you sift it out to sift out some of the bran. But the reason we like to use it is because it does have the bran. It is whole. It's a whole grain, whether it's kamut or triticale or whatever it is, wheat, red turkey, turkey red, whatever.
Okay. Well, can you name a couple of cookbooks that really inspire you?
Yes, I can. And that question was interesting to me. I cooked a lot from Ottolenghi, and I think my books are actually that I that I wanted to talk about. I'm holding up my computer right now, but I love a book that I have on hummus, and it's right here. Maybe you can see it, maybe you can't, I don't know. And hummus is the Arabic word for chickpeas. So it really gets my goat going when I say, somebody makes oh, we have a green pepper hummus or we have a red lentil hummus. I've done it myself, but now I care because it does mean chickpea. This is an amazing book. I also love this book, Southern Ground, which is a baking book about bread and so forth. What else I have? Let's see. Oh yes, Derek Goldstein's books I absolutely love. I have a beautiful book from Turkey which my Turkish brother-in-law sent me. I'm thrilled to have it and to use it, although I don't use it as much as I should because everything is eggplant, base. And if you're in Turkey, you eat a lot of eggplant because it has it just grows and it grows well. But mainly I like reading books that are more about food itself and about cooking. And for example, Herbs in the Earth is a book that somebody just gave to me, partly because their grandfather did the illustrations, and it's a very old book, and it's interesting to see, what's in it, because it's not exactly what you would think. Today we have so many different kinds of basils, and there he had, I think, maybe 2 or 3 kinds. It's different. Again, you look back and you see how things have changed. A more contemporary book is The Chef's Garden, which I just got from Farmer Lee Jones. And that's an amazing book, and it's actually quite doable. Not every recipe is, but some of them are. And you don't have to necessarily, if you have a garden, you can grow a lot of the things that he talks about. Maybe not as well, so forth, but certainly more cheaply than getting them through him. So those are some. And the Ottolenghi I mentioned.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to check out The Chef's Garden. I have the Ottolenghi books. And I like them too. So I think we made a list of the ones that you recommended. We'll include those in our follow-up email. I'm sure our audience will enjoy them.
Great.
Let's see, our next question is a little bit different. How do you keep your weight down while being so involved with food?
Oh, my weight. I lost 20 pounds during the pandemic. I just stopped eating. I don't know what happened exactly. So yeah, now I'm not so involved with food. And I think that's one reason I lost weight, is because I wasn't tasting all the time. And my husband and I, when we went down to the Gila, we shared a banana for lunch because we couldn't find a place to go. Shared a banana? That's nothing, for lunch for a chef. You want a meal, right? So, but we did a lot of that kind of thing, and I lost weight actually. And I think that not writing cookbooks is also a help for keeping weight down.
So it sounds like the answer is to be less involved with food.
Maybe so. I don't know.
Okay, we have another question about Green's Restaurant, what it was like to run Green's Restaurant, if you want to elaborate on anything you said before. And would you consider doing a pop-up in the Bay Area to educate on vegetarianism?
Probably not. I'm not so young as I used to be. Green's was a long time ago. It was hard. Let me answer that question first. I didn't really enjoy Green's. It was a lot of stress to come up with a menu that changed all the time, and to teach people how to cook who had never held a knife and things like that, but it was interesting too. And I in some ways I did enjoy it. I really did. In other ways I didn't enjoy it so much because it was just very, very hard. When I went to Tassajara Har to be the head monk, I broke out in boils everywhere. And I think it's because I really wanted to have a meal that was not about sharing it with all these people or having it old the next day and 2 days later. I just wanted to be taken care of in some way. Vegetarian restaurant pop-up, I don't know, maybe, but I don't consider myself, I'm happy to show people about vegetarian cooking, but I think really they could read a book, and that's why we write books. We want people to read them, to cook from them, and then someday say, oh, I think I know a better way. That's fine with us, those of us who write books. But we do want you to use the books we write and give them a try and so forth. So I think I've written enough books that there's an opportunity for that.
Are pop-up restaurants, like, this is a question for me, I'm just curious, are they as much of a thing in New Mexico as they are here in the Bay Area?
Probably not. Although they could be because we have no restaurants, but I mean, we have a few restaurants. We just don't have enough workers.
Right.
And we're a small city, and Santa Fe is very small compared to the Bay Area. So we don't have those pop-ups so often.
And this is a question from an audience member, do you have restaurant suggestions in Santa Fe?
Restaurant suggestions? Are you coming to Santa Fe? Is that why you're asking?
Somebody in the audience asked, so possibly.
I don't know. I mean, I like where I go. I like Cafe Pascual's. I like La Boca. I like various restaurants, and I'm happy to write suggestions to you. There are also very, very expensive restaurants that we call Texas restaurants because none of us can afford to go to them, that we don't particularly love or care for so much. But there are there are good places. Cafe Pascual's is wonderful. I went there for
We're getting an enthusiastic response to that, to the Cafe Pascual.
Oh, good.
Everybody else has been there. And yes, the person asking the question said they are coming to Santa Fe, so they're looking for specific.
Okay, whatever you do, make a reservation before you get here because there's not a lot to do. I mean, there aren't a lot of free spaces available, is what I mean to say. Even Harry's Roadhouse, which is very close to me, relatively close, which always was covered up all the time, 7 days a week. It's now closed 2 days a week. And they don't do breakfast because they can't get the help that they need.
Right.
And that's true every place, even La Boca, which is Spanish, and I love La Boca. I love it for lunch. No, it's not open for lunch.
It's here too, and restaurants are streamlining their menus as well.
Yeah, that's true too. But Pascual's is still very good, and you should try to go there.
I'm going to put it on my list if I ever get to Santa Fe.
Good.
We have a question. Do you think Nightshade vegetables are bad?
Are they bad?
Yeah, that's the question.
I don't know. I mean, my sister will not eat eggplant, so she says, but she had baba ganoush the other night, which is eggplant based. So I don't know. Many people feel that nightshades, because of the I forget what's in them, but the alkalines are not so good if you have arthritis or you have something like that bothering you, and people still stay away from them. And I think that may be true. I have bone spurs, and I still eat, potatoes once a week at least, and tomatoes now that I have them for this very, very brief window. Again, I think if you tailor your eating to what's in season, you're not going to have a lot of anything for very long, probably. So
that sounds very sensible.
Well, at least that's true here. I mean, our tomato season is like 3 weeks at the most.
All right, we have a couple more questions. We'll finish up. Have you used Georgia O'Keeffe's old cookbooks?
I have. In fact, I wrote an introduction to a more recent book because I was interested in her food. And excuse me, I just have a mosquito in my face. I think that her food sounded very, very simple, but if you take into account that it was from the garden and where she lived up in Abiquiu, it was probably excellent. So I'm not sure what you mean by old recipes or old books of hers, but I worked with this woman who had cooked for her, and so she knew what she was talking about.
That sounds good. Do you wish you spent more time at Chez Panisse? Is it Chez Panisse? Chez Panisse?
Chez Panisse. I spent about 10 years there on and off, and that's quite a long haul. So when I finally left, I was ready to leave the Bay Area. Not so much Chez Panisse. I loved cooking there. I loved eating there, and I still love eating at Chez Panisse. But no, I was ready to leave when I left.
Okay, so our last question is also a restaurant question. Are there any restaurants you would love to go to that you have not been to yet?
Whoa, probably in New York. I would love to go to Dirt Candy. They're very restaurants like that. I'm not restaurant oriented right now, so I haven't thought about it too much. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but this is the last question, I know. But yes, there are restaurants that I would love to go to back east, for sure. But I have no plans of going anytime soon.
Okay, well, thank you. You answered so many of our questions and our audience questions. We really appreciate it. Thank you, Deborah, and thank you to everyone who joined us tonight. Please check out our upcoming author talks at smcl.org/events. We also appreciate it if you could tell us how SMCL did with this program at smcl.org/rate-this-event. And we're going to put that URL in the chat right now, and we're also going to send it out to you in the follow-up email. And that's how we get feedback on our programs, and it helps us to make decisions about future programs. So thank you once again for attending, and especially thank you to Deborah Madison. We really enjoyed having you as a guest at the San Mateo County Libraries.
Thank you so very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.